All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the free Assange online vigil series. Now, today is a very unique episode because this is a birthday special for whistleblower Chelsea Manning. Her birthday is December 17th, and she will be turning 32 years old. So we decided to hold a live stream today. Of course, Andrew's favorite day, Sunday. We finally got it in. So my name is Taylor Hudak, and I'm, of course, joined with my co-hosts, Andrew Smith, Christy Doff, and Steve Poikinen. We have three special guests that are also joining us this afternoon. We have Ron Placone, Jason Burmas, and Sophia Zaldivar. First, I'll be introducing Ron. Ron is a comedian, and I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with him. Of course, he's a regular on the Jimmy Dore Show and hosts the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show, Get Your News On with Ron, and he's also been on SiriusXM and has also appeared on TMZ, RT, and Free Speech TV. So Ron, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for including me and thanks for having me and thanks for doing this. This is a really good idea because I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that Chelsea Manning probably isn't having the greatest birthday in the world. So it's really cool that we're doing this. So thanks for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is all Andrew's idea, I believe. It was a really good, plan to do this to bring awareness to Chelsea Manning because oftentimes I feel like her voice isn't really mentioned when we're having these discussions about free press and free speech. And I believe Steve made the point on his show earlier today, actually, that for most of her adult life, she's been in prison or in some sort of institution somehow. So I
Yeah.
think you're right in saying that, of course, this is not the best birthday for her, and the past several birthdays have not been the greatest. So,
Yeah,
Steve,
it's one of those things. I like whenever I do something like this or participate in something like this, sometimes I see, okay, what's sort of like the general consensus on why these sort of things are tolerated in the slightest. So to kind of start unpacking that, I went to Chelsea Manning's Wikipedia page, and there's literally a sentence in there that says she's in jail right now because of her refusal to testify to a grand jury against Julian Assange. And that was it. It was just a sentence, and that was all. But if you go ahead and decode that sentence, what it's really saying is we want her to tell us something, and she's not telling us this thing that we want to hear, probably because it isn't true. So we're just going to hold her in solitary confinement and subtly torture her until she breaks down and tell us what we want to hear.
It's a little
And
bit more insidious than that, though, Ron. They already have her testimony. She's refusing to go in front of the grand jury because she doesn't want to walk into a perjury trap. What they're going to do is hold her previous testimony over her head. And if she says a word out of place, she's
right.
committed perjury. So she knows that. And the outlets that deign to report on her know that as well, but more often than not, they eliminate that from their reporting because to do so would lend, genuine human empathy for this person who's being slowly tortured.
Right, but and at the end of the day, I guess what I'm getting at is they really want her because what they want is they want to have a smoking gun on Julian Assange, and that smoking gun, in short, and of course it's more detailed than that, but the smoking gun would be, oh, he helped her. He actually helped her hack stuff. He didn't just accept stuff; he helped her because if he helped her, well, that's a crime. Just publishing stuff and even saying, hey, can you get more of this? That's not a crime. That's journalism. But if they say, oh, he helped her, well, now we have our smoking gun. And that's what they really want. And until Chelsea Manning says that, they're going to continue to torture her.
yeah, so because we are all on a screen together, I think it's only fair that I do introduce the other two guests that are with us. As I mentioned earlier, we are joined with Sophia Zaldivar. She's an 18-year-old who was actively engaged in politics and involved in the Tulsi Gabbard campaign. And she posts videos on YouTube covering news and politics, and just recently created her own YouTube channel. So you do want to check that out as well. And then also we have a returning guest, Jason Burmas. He is an independent documentary filmmaker, activist, and now remember, he sent me his own bio, someone who never shuts up, I guess. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I just wanted to introduce both of you guys since you are being since you are on the screen, it only makes sense to cue you in as well. But Ron, if you want to pick it back up, I didn't mean to cut you off, and I can
Oh no, that was it.
open it up to my co-host as well.
Let's jump in on that, because Ron just talked about how they're trying to get this as something where Chelsea Manning says that Julian Assange assisted. If you read that indictment, they also put out the fact that WikiLeaks was putting out cash rewards for actual documentation on corruption from a vast swath of places as evidence that, you know, this person is a cyber terrorist. You know, he was encouraging them to hack them, encouraging them to find passwords. But we all know this is a moot point. He never directly accessed any of this stuff. He never hacked any of this stuff himself. And this is to send a chilling effect, not only on Chelsea Manning and other actual whistleblowers, which is mind-blowing to me because, you know, I just put up a YouTube video about the hearings in Congress right now over the impeachment inquiry, where you have Louis Gohmert list a bunch of supposed whistleblowers, nothing else. I didn't say the name. I was commenting on the fact that the Daily Mail, the Guardian, MSNBC, CNN, even I don't even think Fox News printed the name of that person. First of all, it went up for manual review. It got cleared, but now it's privately locked. They said I had misleading tags. There were 0 tags on the video. It's insane to me that we're on a level right now where we're going after somebody who's just publishing real documentation. And at the same time, in the halls of government, you can't publish an actual congressman saying the name of someone that supposedly is at the heart of this impeachment issue. This is 2019 into 2020. It is the madness. Meanwhile, and let me just get one point because I know Ron's only here for a little while, that OPCW report, the third part leaks, okay? WikiLeaks publishes it. They're still extremely relevant. This further puts a damper on the narrative. This chemical attack happened in Duma in April of 2018. The missiles afterwards were very real. Our overlords at Google sorted by date. Where's MSNBC? Where's Fox? Where's CNN? Where's any media outlet? Where's Newsweek? Nobody. All foreign press. They're the only ones that have reported on it. It's been out for almost 24 hours. It's sickening where we're at.
Yeah, Steve and I were talking about this earlier, but you know, the only person that's probably going to talk about this is Tucker Carlson on Fox, and that's really it. And maybe a couple of independent media, you know, people. But in terms of CNN and MSNBC, you're not going to hear people from that. So
we actually got a chance to go through some of the WikiLeaks drop on my show this morning, and it fascinates me to all hell and back that the core team that presented this report, only one of them had actually been deployed to Duma, and that individual was a paramedic. He had no scientific or forensic training, nothing in his background to determine whether or not these chemical weapons were what they contained or that they were fired by Bashar al-Assad. And he's the one guy included in the core team of presenting and writing the report that had actually been there. It's fucking mind-boggling.
Well, I mean, a bunch of you are suggesting that the United States shot first and asked questions never, and I'm questioning everyone's patriotism here. Just saying.
So guys,
Right.
maybe it would be a good idea if we kind of take a step back in time with Chelsea Manning's history and talk about, we've got some links that we've shared with our guests, and maybe just talk about what was happening, who Chelsea Manning, who was identified as Bradley Manning at the time, was talking to. She obviously sent these leaks, this information to WikiLeaks, but it wasn't WikiLeaks. That wasn't how her identity was exposed. So we want to always preface it that WikiLeaks does protect their whistleblowers, keeps them anonymous, but she was talking to somebody else who ultimately gave her up to the United States, and this really is how we got here. I mean, had her identity was kept anonymous back in 2010, we may not be in this position.
Yeah, I agree. WikiLeaks has a history of protecting sources, of course, and there is no other news organization or outlet who goes to the extent in which Julian Assange and his staff has to protect sources and whistleblowers. And I believe on their website too, they even have tips for whistleblowers who are still in their active careers and in those positions, and telling them and helping them of how to not give yourself up on accident.
And
So it's always important to remember that.
I think it's also important, as just sort of a sidestep, to note that WikiLeaks did help protect Snowden, even though he was not their source. So WikiLeaks is really taken upon themselves to protect whistleblowers, and even when they aren't directly releasing the information through them.
Yeah,
Oh, no,
go ahead,
bro.
Andrew. No, I was just going to add on to that. You guys brought up Snowden, and this is just another one of those, for instances. Yeah, WikiLeaks does protect whistleblowers. Who doesn't? The United States government at all. And we're seeing this now, especially in this impeachment thing. And I think, Steve, you brought this up some, where it's like, when it's a, quote, whistleblower that kind of suits their agenda, there is protection out the wazoo. But if you're a whistleblower on the military industrial complex, or you're a whistleblower on the intelligence agencies, ooh, those are the whistleblowers we do not like, and we do not support you at all. Edward Snowden, a prime example. This is a guy who's saying, hey, I'm willing to come and stand trial, but we got to do this the right way. I get it. I shared stuff I was not allowed to share given my job. So, as he said on Joe Rogan's podcast, he's like, I'm ready to face the music, but let's pick the song. And they're not willing to give him the type of trial he should have. What he did was in the name of the greater good, and that was his intention, which means it should be treated as a political offense. They're unwilling to do that. They're unwilling to do that, and they're unwilling to do that. It's the same situation with Chelsea Manning. It's the same situation with Julian Assange. They're instead ramping up these complete bogus charges, and this is just a blatant assault on press freedom, and we're all living through it. And it's kind of amazing. Like, we'll look back at this and we'll be like, man, I mean, there's that popular meme that you see on the internet. First they came for the journalists, and then I don't know what happened after that. Nobody did. We don't know what happened after that. And it's a weird time to be alive, because you can't help, when I do these things, I personally feel a little uplifted in the sense that it's like, oh, I'm not alone, and there's other people that care about this stuff. But then I can't help but feel a little helpless, because it's like, the people that have the power are not ceding it at all, and they're not doing the right thing, and they're not even willing to do anything close to the right thing. And so many people are complicit in this. It's mind-boggling. And I think the reason for that is because there's not enough entities talking about this stuff.
Right. So something you were kind of talking about, not the people that are complicit in this. I wanted to point out, so Chelsea Manning was arrested in May 2010, and her information was given to WikiLeaks, but WikiLeaks worked with other partners on this, the New York Times, the Guardian, and Der Spiegel, and they published first before WikiLeaks. I think that's an important thing to note as we watch the persecution of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, that these three other news outfits are not being named in the indictments and are not being held accountable, that if this really is about national security, why is the United States government not going after the New York Times, the Guardian, Der Spiegel? They published first. So I think that's, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's a great point. I want the guest's perspective, Sophia or Jason here, Ron, your perspective on that very fact that Christy was bringing up, in addition to the fact that we also have learned that Julian Assange was extremely careful when publishing these documents, among other documents, whereas these other mainstream publications and corporate media was in fact much more careless. And then in the corporate media, they do try to switch that and accuse Assange of being the more careless actor here. What is your perspective on that?
Well, it's selective enforcement, right? I mean, right? Isn't it selective enforcement? Like he was talking about real whistleblowers. Either you never hear about them or you hear about them going to jail. Someone like John Kiriakou, the American public is largely, unaware of his entire story about, hey, torture is the norm. We train people for that. And he said a lot of more provocative things afterwards. Or, pre-Snowden, you want to talk about the Track Trace Database Society and that documentation. Well, you could look at Hepting versus AT&T, where you had 24 IT professionals all the way back in the 90s talking about AT&T and all these large communication systems having Norris Insight systems in their own server room, siphoning this off to the NSA. How many people know who Mark Klein is? Not many, because PBS and Keith Olbermann are the only ones who ever did a story on that. And it was twice kicked out of court. So not only do we have selective enforcement on the government's end of it, but then you have manufactured outrage and selective reporting on the state-controlled media. And if you don't think that the mainstream media is state-controlled at this point, I mean, I don't know who thinks either side of the fence is real. You have those outliers that don't make sense, I guess, with Tucker Carlson. Like, Tucker Carlson probably will report on the OPCW leaks next week and nobody else. But at the same time, he's a disciple of people like Bill Kristol. He still doesn't tell the full truth. He'll still support Trump on a lot of issues that I can't get behind. So, I think the public's apathy is one of the biggest problems, because here we are almost 18 years later in this quote unquote war on terror. That's not just Afghanistan, not just Iraq anymore, not just Libya, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, etc. It's gotten out of control, and most people would rather look at their magic box on Instagram and Snapchat away or TikTok than get involved in these issues. They don't even realize that Assange can't get access right now to the evidence they supposedly have against him. That's where we're at.
He doesn't even know the witnesses that are going to be testifying against him. He doesn't.
Insanity. How can you even set up a defense?
Yeah.
I mean, and this is, again, it's almost a complete blackout in the United States. You won't see this on the nightly news. And when he is mentioned, he's mentioned as a cyber terrorist by people like Meghan McCain, while Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar shake their heads in agreement. It's a sick fucking world.
Right. So right now, on the screen, Steve has pulled up for us a timeline of Chelsea Manning's history. This is from the ACLU. They do a pretty good job, I think, outlining this. I did briefly look at it. You see all of this starts back in May of 2010. So this has been going on for some time, going on a decade now that this has been.
And let's talk a little bit about what Chelsea Manning was asking of WikiLeaks, because I think the indictments get a little misconstrued that there was somehow Chelsea was asking them to hack in, but Chelsea Manning had access to this information. She had clearance to be able to get this information. What she was asking was if they could find a way to make sure she's anonymous when she pulled it out, giving her an anonymous profile, so that really to try to limit her trail of being the one of taking this information out. So I think that's really important to understand that Chelsea Manning did have clearance to access this information, and that doesn't get reported very well, I don't think.
So Sophia, I want to get your thoughts in on this, and of course, not to bring up your age, but I think it's a valid point, is that we've literally been at war your entire life, for literally your entire life, for the overwhelming majority of mine, in fact. Seeing all of this, what is your perspective on not really so much like the media's characterization of all of this, but just how efforts to continue this military-industrial complex, the efforts that are put towards that? What is your perspective on that through the eyes of a young person who's been, subjected to, I guess, war their entire life, or the U.S. has been at war their entire life?
Well, I think what's really upsetting is that most people, they talk about this current period as a time of peace, just because it's just like these wars are not, it's not as direct as something like World War II or something like that. Like, I've had people, like even like teachers in high school suggest that this is peacetime, when in reality, we're never at peace, which, it's absurd to me. So the problem was more so finding out, that we are so involved in the first place, to me was the worst part of it, because it was just, brushed under the rug, our interventions everywhere. And of course, the countries that we intervene in, through covert means and whatnot. But yeah, I think the worst part too is also how the media deceives people. And as we see with these recent OPCW report leaks and everything, and what the whistleblowers have been coming out and saying, I think the worst part of it is that these supposedly credible news organizations like the New York Times, Washington Post, and whatnot, they're the ones that are always pushing these wars. And it just like, what don't they lie about, I think is the worst part.
Who are these teachers that are telling you we're in peacetime? Who are they? What are their standards for saying this? Don't actually give me names, but what are these qualifications? They're like, we're only bombing like 7 countries or so. If it's under 10, that's peacetime.
Just 7.
We've always been at war with Eurasia.
It was actually funny because when this one teacher said that, she was my economist teacher. She's like somewhat of a neocon, I guess, so it made sense. But when she said that, even a couple of the students pushed back. So it just goes to show like it's reversed that role of like who's authoritative, like in terms of who's a credible source. Like even the students know that it's not correct to say that it's relatively, peaceful times.
What did the neocon economists say? They were like, technically we're not at war because it's the invisible hand that drops the bombs. It's not people. It's what they said.
And the bombs carry freedom, Juan.
We're bombing them with love and freedom.
They're free market bombs that have democracy inside when they explode.
Yeah.
So stop asking questions, kids.
So if I could pivot us a little bit, I know we only have a little bit of time left with you, Ron. Could you talk a bit about your leading the fight for net neutrality and ways that people can get involved?
Sure. And, to kind of connect it into the issues we're talking about, as far as the exchange of ideas goes, we need a free and open internet, otherwise stuff like this would not be able to occur. And, for anyone who's not as familiar with these issues, net neutrality is just a policy that designates the internet as a utility. Well, it has to be treated like flowing water or a phone call, which means that content can upload faster for somebody who pays fees. You can't have designated fast lanes and slow lanes on a permanent basis for the internet. We've had net neutrality since we've known the internet. We got it formally on the books in 2015, got it taken away in 2017. The big fix for this is to take the internet out of the hands of big cable and out of the hands of the Comcast and AT&Ts of the world and put it into the hands of cities and municipalities so they can build their own internet. Bernie Sanders actually does have a bill for this, but really we got to get it done in our cities and our municipalities. And that's something that you can try to start to do. I mean, I live in Pasadena, California. I've shown up to a few city hall meetings to raise this issue. Other people have seen that online. They have done similar things in their cities. Some people have scored meetings with their mayors about this. There's a study that Harvard University has done, pretty reputable university to my understanding. And what they found was that whenever cities take the internet and put it in their own hands, most of the time they get better internet at a cheaper price. It's either better or very comparable. And 100% of the time it's at a cheaper price than these big cable companies who are just looking to price gouge you and screw you over. I know you're thinking, Ron, one of my favorite things in the world is calling Comcast's customer service. I would miss it so much if we had this world that what you're describing. I would miss it. It's the holiday season. I'm hoping I get a couple calls to my cable company. I love it. But what I'm telling everyone, give this a chance. I think this could work. So the way people can get involved, I have a playlist on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ron Placone. It's dedicated to net neutrality and municipal broadband. I'm trying to make some mini documentaries about the issue. If anybody wants to support that, my Patreon is patreon.com/Ron Placone, because I need to get a crew. I need to get some producers involved. I have some folks that are interested, but we need to kind of build this thing. So yeah, that's basically what's going on there. And to connect it with this, again, if we don't have a free and open communication vehicle, how can we start solving our problems? We're talking a lot about the OPCW report and about war and about issues of, our imperialism around the world. If our only outlet was the corporate media, we would know absolutely nothing, because they don't talk about this stuff, or they barely talk about this stuff, as we've pointed out. So yeah, and you can find me on Twitter at Ron Placone. RonPlacone.com is my website. I tour a bunch, so I hope to be in your city in 2020. And yeah, thanks so much for letting me be a part of this. This is a really important cause, and I really appreciate you guys doing this, because hopefully it's turning more eyes onto this issue, and people are seeing it through a lens where we're talking about what's actually going on, not just at the propaganda sound bites that the corporate media throws out every now and again. So thanks for including me, and I really appreciate you guys doing this.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on. I think a really good point that Ron was just making was the fact that if we were just, if we didn't have independent media, I mean, there's so much that we wouldn't know, that people wouldn't be exposed to. But can you imagine if we didn't have WikiLeaks? I believe we've talked about this before, but in particular, how much we would not know. The value in WikiLeaks is so important. And for people that can't see that, if you think about what we wouldn't know if we didn't have WikiLeaks, I think that's really important too. I mean, we probably wouldn't have any like concrete proof about Syria in particular, and it would make it much easier for people to smear others who have viewpoints that kind of challenge the mainstream media Syria narrative. So for our other two guests, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're 100% right. I mean, look, again, here we are with Assange. Not only, I mean, sure, he's in dire straits right now, but while in an embassy, how much got done? I mean, the Panama Papers, if we want to go all the way back to what Manning released, the C-130 footage, the abuses at Abu Ghraib and other black sites, the amount of information and documentation, the DNC emails. I mean, listen, you could say what you want about those DNC emails and yada, yada, yada. But if you look at how creepy the Podestas are and how they're joking about old Dennis Hassert, a serial pedophile for 30 years, I want to know about that. I want to know it's a fucking joke to these guys. I want to know what demons I'm dealing with. So on so many levels, they remain relevant. The OPCW, listen, when you grab kids off the street and throw them into a hospital and dump water all over them, and you act like they're victims of a chemical attack so you can send fucking missiles in there to kill more people. Yeah, it's really important we have someone standing against that. So many people are born with this mindset where it can't happen to them because we live a nice life. Hey, I'm not going to lie. I got a decent house. I don't pay a lot for it, and I don't own it. It's a rental, but I'm able to take care of my family. My nieces are in the other room. They just watched Abominable. They're playing with Legos. We got a pretty good thing going. But I'll tell you what, on the other side of the world and in a lot of other places, they don't have that good thing going. They weren't born into that good thing. All right. And they're born into a system of oppression where they're just trying to get by. And instead of them having to go against their tyrannical government where they got a smartwatch on, a nice smartphone and dinner waiting, no, they got to worry about a smart bomb. They got to worry about imperialists coming into their nation, whether it's the United States, whether it's Israel, whether it's Saudi Arabia. I mean, you go on and on and on, coming in and taking their stuff lawlessly and then imprisoning them and torturing them. I mean, that's reality. And if you can't look at yourself and put yourself in a position of one of the other 8 billion people on the planet, I don't know what to say. WikiLeaks has provided countless documentation that you should do so.
So just to point out too, this isn't something that happens only on foreign soil in the name of America. This is something that Taylor and I witnessed the day that we went to Chicago to see Jimmy Dore. We have police forces, the ICE raid. So Jimmy's actual stand-up was in a Latino community, and you walk through the neighborhood and it was beautiful. Like there were festivals everywhere, just people outside grilling, all hanging out with their food trucks, just family, friends, everyone there. And downtown Chicago, there's 10,000 people protesting because the next day ICE was going to come in and start rounding people up out of these communities.
They had helicopters. Remember, we were in the Uber and we're like, look at this. And these people were not doing anything wrong. They were just, there completely walked throughout that community. We were talking to people. We were putting up signs. It was really, really unfortunate that this is taking place.
And it's not, so the big point is this imperialism doesn't just happen overseas. It happens inside of veils of secrecy. We have millions of people in concentration camps all across the southern border and even across the state of Ohio and other states simply for the crime of existing because they were brought here as children or came here to seek a better life. Um, so I like to clarify that because imperialism happens at home. It's just hidden because our media doesn't cover it.
And I wanted to bring it back to WikiLeaks, that I think if WikiLeaks had not existed, we all wouldn't probably be here talking about this. I mean, I think WikiLeaks has contributed a lot to our waking up, everybody in our chat. And like the scene Jason was depicting, this nice, beautiful, comfortable home with children playing, it's hard now being awake to just look at that and not think about everything else that's happening in the world and thinking about how not everybody has this comfort.
Look, people used to look to the sky for inspiration or to draw some kind of larger meaning out of existence. And in major cities all across the United States, in countries on the other side of the world, people don't look to the sky for inspiration because they know that's where death is coming. They know that's where surveillance is coming. And it's such a fucked up existence that I, I don't know, it's all becoming circular. The article that I'm about to pull up right now, like we've discussed on this show multiple times, and Jason, I know you've mentioned it, Sophia, you have as well. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, the current rapporteur on torture, has made declarative statements multiple times about the treatment of Julian Assange. In a case of history repeating itself, this exact thing happened to Chelsea Manning. Then Bradley Manning. Oh Jesus, that's a big. But yeah, back in 2012, Juan Mendez, the then UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, came out with a very declarative statement saying that the treatment of then Bradley Manning amounted to cruel and inhuman and degrading. And the only reason he couldn't classify it as outright torture is because he was denied access to have a personal interview with Manning to discuss what was going on. It is, and this was, this is 2012. This is the better part of a decade ago. And the lesson learned seems to be the state can get away with it as long as they spin it right, because not enough people are holding them accountable.
And this was happening on US soil. I mean, whether it was military bases or actually on the continental US, this wasn't happening somewhere in some cave in the Middle East. That we like to think about torture does not happen in this country. We don't torture prisoners. And now with Julian Assange, it is happening in the UK, but essentially the UK is just acting as a proxy to allow the US to torture him in the same ways.
Yeah,
we like to think. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just gonna say it's really hypocritical of us to go around and intervene in other countries and pretend like we care about human rights and whatnot, and then our excuse is, oh, they're torturing dissidents and whatnot, when clearly that's what we're doing here, and of course with the UK with Assange. So it's just incredibly hypocritical and really disheartening that we have selective outrage in terms of those human rights abuses.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you bring up that point, because the US, we like to call out other countries like Russia for treating journalists poorly. Places like Iran and China, our adversaries, we like to call out their abuses of human rights. But the point is, and Susie Dawson says this, if you are a persecuted journalist, you better hope that you are from Russia, because that is the only way that the American corporate media is going to care what happened to you or even say your name. We see this time and time again. So we like to point out other countries' faults, of course, but when we are doing things to journalists, like what happened with Max Blumenthal, what we're doing to Julian Assange, we don't want to talk about that. And Steve, I know you pulled up an article just there and you highlighted a quote. Do you want to read that?
I'm going to go back to it real quick.
Okay.
And again, this is from 2012. The special rapporteur concludes in imposing seriously punitive conditions of detention on someone who has not been found guilty of any crime is a violation of his right to physical and psychological integrity, as well as of his presumption of innocence. And we still, to this day, are witnessing the exact punitive conditions being applied to Chelsea Manning. Almost $170,000 in fines for not walking into a perjury trap, approaching 300 days of more incarceration after spending 7 years in prison in Leavenworth over this. And that's after being tortured in Kuwait, after being tortured and held in solitary in Quantico. Like, all of these things just to punish someone for exposing the crimes of empire. We, as the citizens of this country, have a fundamental right to know what our government is doing in our name.
Mhm.
I full fucking stop.
And even though we know this, where is the outrage behind it? We know Chelsea Manning is being kept in prison to torture her to speak. We know she's financially being abused, but where's the outrage?
Yeah, and it's a really small portion of independent media that's actually covering this accurately too, which is what I was talking with Steve about earlier. But it's just like most of the people are just covering, electoral politics, this election cycle and whatnot, and they're not really focusing on issues that are really, pressing issues that we need to all be concerned about, but it keeps getting brushed under the rug as if it were nothing. And this is like when we get outraged over the Khashoggi incident, we don't get outraged over Assange as much because there's not that because the mainstream media isn't pushing it. It isn't pushing that concern. And then independent media, it should be filling that void, but it's not really. It's just a really small minority. It's really just you guys and then, a couple of, Jimmy, he uses his platform to cover Assange and Manning and all the other whistleblowers accurately. But
Jason does too. Jason covers it quite a bit. He's had all four of us on. Graham Elwood covers it. Jimmy covers it, and Steve, of course. You do as well. Yeah, and I agree. I think everybody here would really like to see it be covered more extensively by others who just choose not to talk about it at all. Like, there are some independent media personnel who literally will avoid that topic because it doesn't generate likes, views, and income. So it's, or not income, but you get your videos demonetized.
You're right. It's income at the end of the day. It's the bottom line is money. It's support. You're 100% right. Forget about views and likes. I mean, that is the new social income. And on top of that it is about money. Again, you can't have all these people now. We're about to have an election. We're less than 365 days away from the 2020 election. You can't have someone who ran in 2016 on loving the WikiLeaks, can't get enough of the WikiLeaks, et cetera, where you can't ask that question, how did you let this indictment happen? And it shows how controlled the media is, because once again, if they hate Trump so much, why not ask him a legitimate question about Julian Assange and what's going on with that indictment and how valid it actually is and how it affects our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our freedom of speech, the Fourth Estate, et cetera, et cetera. Those are real things. And for the alternative media to turn that off because it's going to make you more money on your dick pills is not fucking acceptable. Period. All right? Period. I don't care how good they are. I don't know how great your iodine is or whatever. Listen, and I'm not against capitalism. I'm not against selling. I'm not. But when you compromise yourself so vividly in front of people, when you yourself were touting Julian Assange as a hero not 2-3 years ago and making it a main point of your talk show, and now you cringe when somebody calls in and says, God bless Julian Assange, because you might have to fucking address the issue, it's a problem.
Right, and I forgot to include, I can't believe I forgot to include Gordon Dimmick in that list as well. He covers it extensively. Another really, really great source is Gordon Dimmick. Do check him out. He's a friend of our vigils as well. He is another
Camp is another one.
Yes.
Mhm.
So see, when I do
been
this, I should start listing people, because when I
yeah.
do, I'm going to forget some people. So yes, I want to make sure.
It doesn't matter who you forget until you forget somebody in the chat's favorite broadcaster. And
Okay,
then it matters. But the whole point is, like, the fact that we can just kind of rattle off a handful of names, and
Right, that it's a dozen or so names, not that it's like a list this long that everybody's covering Assange. It's that you can actually name them. That's the problem.
and in most cases, we can point to a vigil episode where those people have been on this program. Like, it's not like there's a ton of people that are inaccessible that are speaking about this every day. And one of the things that the media will never do, this is something that I want to kind of circle back to, because Jason mentioned it, and it's such a good point. Like, Trump saying, I love the WikiLeaks, bring on the WikiLeaks, we need more WikiLeaks. One of the only times the Democrats are in lockstep with Trump is in his persecution of Julian Assange and through this indictment. When it comes to war, when it comes to brown bodies on the ground and blood being spilled in the name of the dollar, that's when bipartisanship happens. Surveillance, that's when bipartisanship happens. And as much as the dog and pony show of Orange Man Bad is throughout the DC Beltway, they are 100% in lockstep with Donald Trump, this man that they've made out to be the biggest monster in the entire history of monsters. Lockstep with this fucking guy when it comes to making sure that Julian Assange is silenced, that Chelsea Manning continues to be punitively fined and fucking incarcerated, that Jeremy Hammond sits in the same jail that Chelsea Manning is at after being yanked out of minimum security and delivered on the doorstep of the Eastern District of Virginia, so that they are gathering all of the people involved with the releases that WikiLeaks had in 2010 and 2011 and putting them all in the same easily accessible fucking, a human zoo in order to continue to torture, in order to continue to punitively punish and further damage these individuals. It's fucking nuts. And there's not enough. The simple fact that this show exists proves that there's a ton of people that aren't doing their job as broadcasters and journalists.
And I think that's you make the point of the Democrats agreeing with Trump on this. And I think that's why we won't see Julian Assange's name mentioned on a debate stage, is because that would show the true colors of majority of the Democrats running for president, is that they do agree with Trump. They do want to see Julian Assange pay for exposing these secrets. They don't want to expose the military industrial complex, and they don't want the public to know what's really happening with our tax money in our name, and what a mess the whole Afghan war has become.
And also, not to mention that the Democrats are in lockstep with Trump also, while they're claiming that he's attacking the media, that he's against the First Amendment. And it's never about Julian Assange. It's about, mean comments that he makes to certain journalists. Or,
it's about Jim Acosta can't go and blow smoke up Trump's ass, and everybody has to throw a fit, and then all the liberals have to cry about press freedoms when they really don't actually care what's happening in Belmarsh right now.
They don't care about press freedoms at all. Only certain journalists, only for I wouldn't even say maybe even just like corporate American journalists, but they care if it's like someone in another country. Again, it's an adversary or adversary to the United States.
They can use another country's abuse of a journalist against them, then they're going to, but not.
Because it serves them it'll serve them in some military initiative or some way it'll benefit the military industrial complex. I know we have on the screen right now something, Andrew, Steve, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, we need to talk about this one.
So this is back to the ACLU timeline, April 2011. After being held for almost a year in solitary confinement in Kuwait and in Quintino, Chelsea was transferred to a minimum security prison in Kansas. Shortly after her transfer, the ACLU sends then Defense Secretary Robert Gates a letter objecting to her treatment as cruel and unusual. And I just want to highlight this as a way to kind of push back. Like, it wasn't successful. Sending letters and things like that, it's a great way to get people aware and involved, but at the end of the day, we have to try to find ways to make bigger statements, because this is a struggle that's been going on for over a decade now. And so I think that things like this and trying to get groups together to get more of these people talking, like almost 300 academics, most of them legal scholars, signed a letter objecting to her treatment. We need either more of that, and we're starting to see it with like Doctors for Assange and groups like that. But largely, Chelsea Manning has fallen to the wayside. So I think it's just super important, because even like in May, that's when Niels Melzer went out there, or not Niels Melzer, Juan Mendez, to talk about the actual torture that was going on. So it's like the fact that these reports still have to come out to tell everyone, it's just a way of seeing that the world just hasn't changed.
So yeah, so we're looking at this timeline, and initially Chelsea Manning was charged with aiding the enemy, which the United States government would later testify that nobody was harmed or killed as a result of these leaks. And that smear to this day is still being perpetuated, that Julian Assange must pay for publishing this information because it hurt people.
So we know that that's not true, of course. I mean, there is so much to be said about that.
And I think we've probably all encountered people who have argued that point to us. I've had people scream in my face about that, actually. And it's a smear on the narrative of what happened with those leaks. And
well, Christine, let me jump in here for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
People that say that to you, the only leaks they can tell you about are the DNC leaks, because the media harped on them. They're going to tell you they came from Russia. So that's how fucking informed they are.
Right.
I guarantee you that 99.9% of the people that would approach you and tell you that Julian Assange is a cyber terrorist or WikiLeaks is somehow a negative to our freedom of press and to our allotment of information that allows us to make decisions on ourselves, they're parroting a narrative that has now been pushed down their throat for 3+ fucking years, and that's it. They don't know what the Panama Papers are. They don't understand about what Manning released herself or anything they've ever done. They have no idea of any basis of WikiLeaks and what they're truly about. And that's the problem.
Exactly.
You have that conversation with them. You go, all right, well, tell me what else they leaked other than the DNC emails. You're going to see a blank stare. You're probably going to see some drool come out the side of their mouth as they babble for a second and can't think and try to get to their phone real quick so they can Google something. But that's how fucking unintelligent and ignorant and proudly ignorant they are, because they watch Rachel Maddow every day and they're thinking about that same lesbianic haircut. Sorry, I had to.
And also, like, there with regard to Russiagate, there were so many different benefits, I guess, to the establishment with Russiagate. But then also one of them is, of course, the smear campaign against Assange. And then you have people. I was going through a couple of Mehdi Hasan's old tweets where he actually had been supportive of Julian Assange, but now he slanders him and says that he helped Trump and whatnot. But then he eventually came to some kind of milquetoast defense of him, because he knew that if he doesn't defend Assange's freedom, then he's under attack too for his journalism. But that entire campaign, the Russiagate campaign, also benefited them in that way, in that regard too.
And just bled right into Ukraine Gate without anyone fucking shifting gears or anything like it. They just went from, okay, well, nothing really came out of, Russiagate that we wanted, but hang on, Donald Trump made a phone call. And we can't have that. That was a phone call that should have been made by back channels and done in the dark the way we fucking like it. So we're going after him again, not for anything impeachable, even though the House will, give votes to impeach the guy based on their feelings. But no, we know that the OPCW report was not the report that was sent to the OPCW. It is disingenuous to believe that the President of the United States didn't know that that was a doctored report. It's disingenuous to believe that members of Congress on the House Intelligence Committee, who just voted to impeach Donald Trump for making a phone call, it's disingenuous to believe that they didn't know that this was a doctored report. The guaranteed thing you could get Donald Trump on, committing a fucking war crime in Syria based on information he knew to be false. The Democrats, once again, right there supporting it and advocating more military action in Syria, knowing that this was a fraudulent report. It's just, it's theater, guy. Like it's professional wrestling. Donald Trump himself is in the WWE Hall of Fame.
He is, and you're right. And I want to jump back to the impeachment talk, because in the beginning you talked to Placone about the fact that Nancy Pelosi said, well, we didn't want to make into a thing by impeaching George W. Bush. A lot of people don't know that, Dennis Kucinich read 30 plus articles of impeachment before the House on Bush, and they are largely ignored. And not only from weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and all sorts of other war crimes, but 3 of them had to do with 9/11. That's history that's often not talked about. Some people throughout history do stand up. They do say things. Kucinich was far from perfect. But even people I dislike historically have done some things I do like. For instance, anybody that's followed my work, I've never been a fan of Barack Obama. I never fell into the hope and change nonsense. I could see what he was. He was well-spoken, he was intelligent, and he was backed by the military-industrial complex. He was backed by the Kissingers of the world, by the Zbigniew Brzezinskis of the world. I saw where this was going. That's why I was shocked as fuck when he commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence. One of the only 2 things that I can point to in that presidency that I thought were positive, that and the Iran deal, which brought us away from that conflict. Those were the 2 things I was saying to myself, oh my God, I can't believe this has happened. So finally, Manning's sentence is commuted. I think, well, you know what? Every once in a while, there's a little justice in the world. All of a sudden, the guy that runs on the WikiLeaks comes into power, and without a question about Manning. We've got 1 question about Assange from this so-called free press we have. Not 1 question to the guy about Manning. And like you guys said, and why this broadcast exists right now, it's shameful. 300 plus days in jail, probably in solitary confinement, pressured to what? Lie. And that's what they want. They don't want the fucking truth. They want lies. That's all they want. And we got a system based on lies, and we got a predator class that feeds on them and our inability to combat those lies effectively. So guys, I love you. And I'll see you on the flip side. Continue to promote this thing, and hopefully have you all on my show in the near future. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Jason, thank you so
Thanks,
much for coming
Jason.
on. Jason is a friend of the show. All 4 of us have been on his show. Follow him at Jason Burmas. He covers Assange. He's one of the few and small list of people that do cover Julian and really important stuff that most people aren't talking about. So for you guys in the chat, if you are new here, do make sure that you subscribe to our channel. Make sure you like the video, and also hit the bell so you know when we do go live. I did ask you guys to give us your questions in the chat, valuable questions that will drive an important and meaningful discussion. So here I know that they wanted to, somebody asked us, I can't pronounce this name, Conrado de, I'm not going to even try. We've talked about this before, though. They are asking us about our comments on the British judges and their conflict of interest. We've, of course, spoken about this quite a bit when we learned more information about these judges. You know, one of the judges, I believe it was Vanessa Baratzer, or she's not even a judge, she's a magistrate, failed to disclose her conflict of interest. Another magistrate or judge actually had was actually implicated in WikiLeaks documents.
Her husband was, her son has connections.
And
I
son,
mean,
yeah.
really, I'm failing to find a judge that is on this case that does not have some sort of conflict of interest or connection to something that WikiLeaks has exposed. I mean, really, this is, when we talk about the British judges, this isn't about British justice. This is about the US using the British court system to get what they want. The October 21st hearing, there were 5 Americans sitting behind the judge and, you know, conferring with how things were going to go. People in the gallery watched this happen. This isn't an unbiased seat of judges that could give justice to Mr. Assange. This is the empire.
The prosecutor literally got up from his desk and went to the back to huddle with 5 US State Department officials, then turned around and walked back to the desk and delivered the State Department's response or series of statements to the fucking judge, who went, yeah, right, that sounds good. You know, I mean, like that was it. That was the extent of it.
Yeah, they said that the judge in her, for those who were there, Craig Murray in particular, noted that the judge or magistrate was very clear in her facial expressions and her demeanor that she was clearly favoring the prosecution. But even despite that, that's not really the most important part of this. The fact that she had clear conflicts of interest and that was not disclosed. And then also her son was working for an anti-leaking company or anti-data leaking company that had publicly condemned WikiLeaks for their work and the type of work that they're involved in. I mean, there were just so many things.
Let's not also forget that in conjunction with this extradition hearing process, there is a process going on in Spain over the security firms spying on Mr. Assange in the embassy and giving that information to the CIA, and that the UK initially blocked it so that Julian was unable to testify. They have now since allowed him. He will be testifying December 20th for this case, but they also denied a request to extend the extradition hearing so that his defense can utilize the evidence from that spying case into this extradition hearing. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces here, and they all are the empire behind them.
And look, if you are a titled person, like one of the justices that we've been talking about, is Lady Arbuthnot, who's, I don't know if she's a duchess or an earless or whatever the hell it is, you know.
She's a lady.
Yeah. Lady, and not like you know, Beastie Boys, hey ladies lady, but no, but my point is, if you have a title like lady or lord, you should not be in any way, shape, or form connected to the justice system. Like, having that title means that you were born crooked. You know, like, there's a history of theft and colonization and you know, actually, no, these lands are mine, and so are all the people on it. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to take your wife and put you in prison because then I get to take your wife and my name's Lord Arbuthnot and I get to do that, so fuck off. Like, you should not be connected to the criminal justice system whatsoever. Where I was going with all of that.
Yeah, all regard for the law has been disregarded in this case, and hopefully, like Christy was mentioning, there is a there is a court appearance, or not appearance,
So
but
there's two coming up. December 19th will be the case management hearing for the extradition hearing, and there'll be some more discussion about what's going to happen in February. And then the next day, December 20th, will be when Julian is actually going to be transferred from Belmarsh to Westminster Magistrates Court to testify via video link into the Spanish case over the spying, the UC Global CIA spying case. So two big dates coming up.
Yeah, and we will, of course, be talking about that on Wednesday. We'll all be tweeting about it, keeping you informed, because I'm sure there's going to be some information that we can learn that will take place at those two court events. So now I know Steve we're gonna kind of go back to Chelsea Manning again. Of course, this is a birthday special, and we're gonna put up the timeline again for all of you. I believe we were discussing 2011, 2012.
We're
around
on
there. So okay, we're 2013.
So we're getting into 2013. Okay, yeah. So August 2013 is when Chelsea announced her transgender. I believe her name change, what she preferred for her name. But it looks like at this time the military did not want to support any sort of medical hormone therapy. So this is a kind of an underlying thing that's been happening for Chelsea as she's been going through all of her trial, her imprisonment, her torture, and even being imprisoned again. When she was imprisoned earlier this year, she had just come off of having a gender reassignment surgery. So you can imagine the medical care and maybe even, I don't know if therapy is the right word, but I mean, that kind of an extensive medical reassignment surgery and then being thrown into a prison system probably wasn't the most comfortable. Probably the care was not the best and optimal for what a person would need during that recovery time. So that itself is torturous, that she wasn't even allowed to heal and recover at home through that process.
And
to point this part out too, in the early 90s or late 90s and early 2000s, the military was spending millions upon millions of dollars a year on Viagra for the impotent soldiers that were coming home because of stress conditions and things like that. And then for them to say, well, we don't think gender dysphoria is a condition, like transgenderism isn't real, like you can't just be someone else, like that's craziness. You can't have to have some drug to properly get your body to respond the right way. So it's the fact that the military will spend millions and millions of dollars on Viagra and then not do a gender reassignment surgery and not assist with this hormone therapy is just crazy to me.
Right.
So look, the ACLU sued the Department of Defense over this. Where's the ACLU right now for Chelsea Manning and Jeremy Hammond and Julian Assange?
Exactly. When I was looking at this, I thought, you know what, this is a great overview, but they have been silent. And that's why these organizations really cannot be depended on, because again, I think they are sort of just an arm or extension of, you know, the government almost in a way. And I think I may be using the wrong term there. But yeah, it seems interesting that at this point here, this seems to be a pretty fair assessment, I think, but they've been silent on Assange, I believe, at least recently. I could be wrong though, but I do believe they have been silent, or at least have not spoken up to the
I feel
extent
like
they should.
sorry, I was just going to add, I think when Bernie Sanders tweeted his vague, response to what happened to Julian Assange, I feel like he retweeted an article from the ACLU, but it was more of a vague, like, oh, this is an attack on the First
overview.
Amendment by criminalizing journalism. But I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like that's what it was. But obviously they haven't been as vocal about it as they should. But
Right.
So man, it seems like every week we grab Bernie by what's left of his hair and drag him out into the woodshed. I don't really mean to belabor the point here, but if he does manage to make it through the primary, and the Democrats are going to do everything they can to rig this primary to prevent anyone who's remotely progressive or left from becoming the nominee, whether it's Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard. Honestly, at this point, it doesn't fucking matter, because it's a 50-50 shot about as to whether or not they make it through the primary. But if he does, he beats Donald Trump pretty handily as far as all of the polling that whether or not you want to believe, he would have won in 2016. He would likely win in 2020 if he makes it through the primary. But given his behavior on this, his actions on this, I have no confidence that he would act on Julian Assange's behalf without millions of people hammering at him every single day. And that's what it's going to take, because there's no trust there. I'm not going to put any of my faith into Bernie Sanders as a politician. I'm going to put my faith into the people that I do this show with, the people that come on the show, the people that watch this show, that are active within their own community. It's incumbent on us to be this message. Julian Assange himself asked us, not directly but indirectly, to be his voice. That's what we're doing. The entire reason that we're here today is on behalf of Chelsea Manning, and I can't wait to get into the Senate run part of her brief period of freedom. But holy shit, man, we need you guys. We need you to be activated in a decentralized fashion. We need you to be activated not just online but in everyday life, because this shit is not going away, and it's supported by more or less everyone in government. There's no party line when it comes to the destruction of an outlet like WikiLeaks, or an individual like Julian Assange, or an individual like Chelsea Manning. Despite everything that Chelsea Manning has gone through publicly, very, very publicly, to, for the purpose of smearing her, everything that she's gone through, ACLU lawsuits and whatnot, she actually was able to generate a high enough profile activism campaign to get her sentence commuted. That's the kind of energy we need to bring to what's happening to Julian Assange. And I don't want to knock the work of anyone, but I feel like we need to get that sort of energy going in order to be successful with this. I would like someone to take a swing at that.
Okay, this always happens. Do we want to get the timeline up? Because I know we don't have a whole lot of time left. Do we want to pull that up?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Steve will pull that up for us, guys. If you have questions for us, do leave them in the chat. As he's pulling that up, make sure you are subscribed and that you like this video. So here we are at May 2016. Sophia, do you want to provide an overview of these events right here in your thoughts?
Sure, sure. So May 2016, Chelsea appeals her conviction. The ACLU files an amicus brief in support of the appeal. We argue that her prosecution under the Espionage Act of 1917, which does not allow defendants to argue that their disclosures were made in the public interest, violated the Constitution and should be overturned. My comment would be that is a direct attack on the First Amendment, on freedom of speech, because again, this is just Chelsea Manning acting on behalf of the people. Clearly, that those disclosures were in the public interest, but because she's being prosecuted under this, under the Espionage Act, as a result, she can't even have that right to explain her intentions behind that.
So
Fucked up
I
is
want
it?
to bring up real quick, we did find a statement by the ACLU that was issued on May 23rd of 2019 this year. So they did provide a statement. We could link that in the chat for you guys, but like I said earlier, we were a little bit unclear if they had released anything recently.
I think
but
that's
yes,
the one
they
that
have,
Bernie.
and that was on
Yeah,
May
I think
23rd.
that's the one and only we've got. I don't think they've released anything since.
Yes. So of course, if we find others, we will we'll link that. But they do have a statement here, and it is from Ben Weisner, the director of American Civil Liberties Union's Speech, Privacy, and Technology Project. He issued a statement or a comment in response to the DOJ's charging Julian Assange with espionage. So again, I'm not going to read through it, but we'll link it in the chat.
Cool. So
Just wanted
September
to
2016,
clarify.
Chelsea ends a hunger strike she launched in protest of the Army's refusal to provide her with medical treatment related to her gender dysphoria. After receiving assurance from the military that it would grant her the request for gender transition surgery, a first for transgender amendment. Then January 2017, following a sustained high-profile advocacy campaign, including a WhiteHouse.gov petition, videos from former whistleblowers and celebrities, and letters of support from every major LGBTQ organization, President Barack Obama announced he is commuting all but 4 months of Chelsea Manning's sentence. She will be released May 17th, 2017.
So where are all those people now? Why aren't those people getting upset that she's been imprisoned twice this year? Where is all these celebrities and letters of support from every major LGBTQ organization? Why haven't they spoken up in 2019?
Yeah,
So
I
I
mean,
think-
they have a real opportunity to do so, but of course, it's unfashionable to do so, and
Is
there's
defending
also
a
repercussions for
transgender
it.
whistleblower only cool when it's against the Republicans? Like, is it because of Assange? Is it
I think
because
so.
of Russiagate? Is it because the liberals are mad that Trump is in the office and thereby that's Julian's fault, thereby that's Chelsea? Like, it's only convenient to stand up for a transgender whistleblower when it fits your politics. So where are all these people?
And just to read them off, the letter was signed by the American Civil Liberties Union, BINET USA, College, the Family Equality Council, Forge Inc., GLBTQ Legal Advocacy and Defenders, Immigration Equality, KHUSH DC, Lambda Legal, League of United Latino American Citizens, Los Angeles LGBTQ Center, National Black Justice Coalition, National Center for Lesbian Rights, National LGBTQ Task Force, National Organization for Women, Pride at Work, Transgender Law Center. We need to build this again. This wasn't a one-time thing. This can't be something that happened and then was like, okay, cool, that problem solved, what's next?
Right.
Because this is an ongoing issue. And I don't want to say that these people have just forgotten what happened, but there may not be as many people trying to light a match underneath them, which is what I hope
Right.
we here can do at this vigil. So I'm actually going to reach out to each one of these organizations in the coming weeks to say, hey, we want to bring someone on. We want another statement about this. We want to get some action started again.
So
Just
I
to
have
see.
a question for the panel. Because Chelsea Manning's sentence was commuted rather than pardoned, did this open the door to allow the grand jury to abuse her in this way? If she had been pardoned, could they have brought her back and subpoenaed her on these things?
Yeah, so that is somebody has asked that before. Again, I'm not an attorney or a legal expert. I think that's a valid question. I do not feel qualified to answer it. I want to say no, because I believe a pardon completely throws out the charge. It completely dismisses that it ever
Right.
existed. I think so. It makes sense that they would not allow that to happen. But again, I think we are best to consult probably an attorney. We've had one on before. We should have, next time we have a law expert on, we should ask that very
Yeah.
important question. What do you two think, Steve and Andrew? I'm not certain.
So I think it just gives them more leverage and just gives them more power. Like, regardless of what the legal situation is around how they can treat her with it, at the end of the day, it just keeps that on her record and just keeps it there. And
Right.
she's literally a prisoner of war at this point. Like, she exposed what we were doing, treating innocent people as if they were enemy combatants simply because they were brown and existed in Iraq and we wanted that country.
I mean, the grand jury system is an unfair system to begin with and doesn't really follow the rule of law. But I would be really curious if she had received a pardon, if they could subpoena her in this way, because essentially they're asking her to re-review her trial testimony and not have her lawyers present. I mean, it almost feels a little double jeopardy with how this is being played about. And since only her sentence was commuted and the charges were not fully pardoned, yeah, I just really wonder how calculated that commuting was and how much patting on the back we should really give Obama for that.
I agree with you.
I've pointed it out a couple times that they're literally using letting her out of jail as a way to torture her.
Well, yeah, I completely agree.
She got out of jail.
Abusive situation.
Mm-hmm. It's literally, she was free for 18 months, put back in on the first grand jury, let out for a few weeks, and then put back in on the next grand jury.
Yes.
So it's a way of
given
saying
a second subpoena to bring her back because that grand jury finally ended, and then a new one was started, and a new subpoena came up. So I mean, we can keep playing this game of the grand juries are only lasting so many months. I think it's like a maximum of 18 months. So she's in prison until this grand jury closes, but then a new one can start up and a new subpoena can be. So I mean, this could literally be years.
Indefinite detention. That's what this is. It's indefinite
She's not charged
detention.
with anything. She's not been charged.
But do we want to get into her Senate case? Because there's actually something in there that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, before we do that, real quick though, I want to bring up her legal team's statement, her and Chelsea's statement about this grand jury process, because there's
is this the first or second one?
I think that was if this is from May, I believe that's the first one.
Yeah, it's from May.
She's had some really good statements this year on this situation.
No, I think it's the second one because this is when
this one does have this has the fines in it, so this would be the second one.
Yeah. Yeah, in addition to being held in confinement for the duration of the grand jury investigation, or until she purges her contempt and testifies, District Court Judge Anthony Trenga ordered Chelsea to pay $500 a day. And we all know this. She's been being fined $1,000 a day for months now.
It's up to 100 as of today. I forgot to mention this, that introduction of the stream. Today is day 277 in jail, and she's now up to $168,000 in fines. So yes, it's $1,000 every single day, in addition to being imprisoned.
And in the city that I'm from, that much money could literally buy you an entire city block. Like that is an insane, like,
It's insane, yeah.
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 But
and
to get back to this though, in a sealed hearing, Judge Anthony Trenga heard arguments that this post-indictment subpoena should be squashed as an impermissible effort to compel Chelsea to participate in trial participation, which is beyond the scope of the grand jury's investigative function. Judge Trenga also heard arguments on whether Chelsea was subject to unlawful electronic surveillance, ultimately declining either to demand from the government further assurances on the matter or to quash the subpoena. Prior to being held in contempt, Ms. Manning was heard in open court on her objections to the grand jury as a secret process that runs counter to her values. And by the way, if you haven't read that particular statement that Chelsea made about the grand jury process, you should.
Very good.
And I don't know if it's
basically grand juries, for people that aren't familiar with this process, it's closed to the public. In my opinion, I think it's a huge overreach of the government. But basically, we are not able to know what's really taking place during these grand jury hearings, or we can't see any of the evidence either. It's done in secret. And so when she says that, yeah, right here, it said, whoops. It says, quote, "It is up to the press to stand up for themselves, to stand up for the practice of journalism, and to stand up for Chelsea in the same manner she has stood up for the press, has consistently stood up for the press, rather." A really powerful quote there. Yeah, but she is standing strong in her principles too, in addition to the possible perjury charges she could face, but also the fact that she disagrees with this process. And I think all of us here really do see it as a really abusive system in a way, because pretty much if you're indicted by, or if you're having a grand jury convene against you, your chances of being indicted are extremely high. I believe in that specific district, it's like over 99% chances that you will be indicted.
Yeah, it's a great point. We know about the grand jury process because we've been educated about it. Through Unity for J, through Decipher You, through a bunch of different series put on by wonderful people. And John Kiriaku's been on my show several times. He's been on the Vigil here. He's talked us through the grand jury process. The running joke forever has been the grand jury can indict a ham sandwich, because all you don't like, and it's true, grand juries are impaneled to make sure punitive action takes place against whatever target is being brought before them. Only in circumstances where the state has fucked up so badly that the public knows about it and there's pressure on the grand jury itself to take action, does someone not get indicted. And we definitely have one of those cases here, but it's incumbent, as we just read, on the press to do their fucking job. Christy.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind people, and it could be just preaching to the choir here, but one of the reasons Julian Assange sought asylum and went into the Ecuadorian embassy was because he was aware that there was a secret grand jury back in, he was in the embassy in 2012, but even before that, he knew they had information that these grand juries were forming against him in WikiLeaks and that they were looking at using the Espionage Act. So these grand juries for Chelsea Manning, for Julian Assange, for WikiLeaks have been around a very long time. This isn't something that just suddenly formed in the last 2 years. This is why we have had this decade-long arbitrary detention of Julian Assange in the UK. And I say decade now because it started in 2010. We knew in, I think it was July of 2010, that the U.S. intelligence agencies were looking for a way to essentially find a way to nab him and start this process.
I was just reading a funny ass comment from William Margaret. I'm sorry, man.
About fascism and the Jesuits?
No, about not saying this
Okay.
is a joke, first of all, but isn't it weird that Manning took Clinton's daughter's first name? I bet that infuriated Hillary.
Oh,
Hey, more power to her. If there was some sort of fuck you on that.
I
I
never thought about that.
wants to get to this. I'm gonna pull it up right now because
Yeah.
a lot of people do forget that in her limited period of freedom, Chelsea Manning ran for Senate. Andrew, you want to kind of take us
I,
through this one?
I do, absolutely. So this is something that me being heavily involved at the time in congressional candidates, it was something that I didn't even realize until probably the end of 2018, or end of 2000 and no, I guess middle of 2018. But it was a little bit before the primary, and I hadn't heard any independent media covering about her at all. I hadn't heard at the time. It was mostly like Secular Talk, Jimmy Dore, The Humanist Report, Tim Black, other shows like that, and no one had talked about her. And then there was a point in time in here where she was out of the country, and they wanted to do a wellness check on her. And basically, what happened was they sent armed police officers busting into her house because they thought she might be suicidal. I don't know what situation sending armed police officers blowing down someone's front door without a warrant is an acceptable thing to do against someone running for political office. But that really wasn't even covered that heavily. She didn't get talked about in her Senate run in the independent media until it was towards the end of the primary where she made a veiled threat for a suicide attempt. Just basically showed pictures of her toes hanging off the side of a building and just said, I don't remember what the words were, so I'm not going to try to remember the quote. But that was pretty much the only story that got ran about her Senate campaign through all of independent media. And this was at the time where Bernie Sanders was going around endorsing people across the country. Ocasio-Cortez was one state down trying to get people to support Any Blue Will Do, while at the same time didn't say anything about an American hero running against one of the most corrupt corporatists, Ben Cardin, at the time. So this is her Senate run was one of the things that really set the stage, because it wasn't even about her running. It was about showing the people, at least to me, showing the people that did and didn't support free speech and what whistleblowing actually is. So her Senate run just highlights so much and then gets put back in jail. Like, the only reason I think that they let her stay out as long as she did was because she decided to run for office. And then when they got her out of the primary at 3% is when all of the grand jury shit started happening again.
All right, so we're gonna play her campaign ad real quick.
I'm Chelsea Manning, and I approve this message. We live in trying times. Times of fear. Of suppression. Of hate. We don't need more or better leaders. We need someone willing to fight. We need to stop asking them to give us our rights. They won't support us. They won't compromise. We need to stop expecting that our systems will somehow fix themselves. We need to actually take the reins of power from them. We need to challenge them at every level. We need to fix this. We don't need them anymore. We can do better. You're damn right we got this.
That's beautiful.
Oh, you're muted, Sophia.
Yeah, that's interesting because I don't see her as being muted.
I don't either.
That's so strange.
We
Sophia,
keep
we
having
can't
trouble
hear
with
you.
sound.
Yeah. This has happened to me before too.
Back out and rejoin is probably the easiest way.
Yeah,
usually
if you
fixes
just
it.
or restart.
Yeah, sometimes it happens if you don't update Zoom.
Or if you talk about things that are
Well,
politically.
yeah, that too, right? But hey, guys, while she is getting back on, do make sure tonight that you do not miss on Susie 3D at 8 p.m. a super top secret event. Christy and I are going to be hosting that event, so don't miss it. Again, that's at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, streaming on Susie 3D and on Graham Elwood. That is at 8 p.m. Okay, she's back. So
Is it working?
yes, we could hear you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I wish that all the progressive candidates and like the Justice Democrats they had ads that powerful. Yeah, that would have been.
No,
And it was
shit, man. Look, I don't know if I've really gone into how much I think people need to be suspicious of the Just Us Democrats here on the show. I don't think that we have time for it right now because I know Taylor and Christy have to start getting their shit together for the One versus Five Eye show tonight. But look, all you really need to know about the Justice Democrats is that the exact same money that gets mainstream Democrats elected flows into Justice Democrats' coffers. They spent 82% of all of the money that they received in individual donations on themselves and on vendors. Like they're not your friends. Half of the squad supports overthrowing Nicolas Maduro. Like they all vote to give the CIA more blanket immunity than what they had. That was a recent it was back over the summer, but I did a few shows on Slow News Day about it. Yeah, dude, if we had more people that were running for office that were putting out ads like that, I would feel more confident in who my representative.
And there's no reason
like
that these
someone-
candidates that pretend to represent the political revolution don't speak in the terms of revolution and don't say this entire fucking system is corrupt. Like, we're not going to participate. We're here because we're building power separate from you. Instead of saying, hey, I'm going to kneel down and hope that war criminals will let me get a nice position in Congress. So,
Sophia, why don't you, I know you had a thought, and why don't you go ahead, and then as you're speaking, do we want to pull the documentary, the trailer up?
Yeah, I've got it up. It's ready to go whenever.
Okay. Sophia,
what
why
were
don't
you going to say, Sophia?
No, I was just gonna say, like, the problem with them too is that they focus so much on the corruption of like the Republicans and always going after Republicans, and they do a lot of like orange men bad and stuff. Like instead of resisting Trump when it really, when it would really hurt him and when it would be really effective and and powerful for them to use their platforms. Imagine if I think AOC follows Snowden and Manning maybe too, but like she's never vocally shown support for them. Like actually using their platforms to support revolutionary people is really disappointing.
They brought up Reality Winner in her presence. Ryan Grimm did in that interview, and immediately Bernie Sanders is like, "I've never heard of Reality. I'm
not familiar with their case."
Like, and not just immediately, and AOC's like, "Yeah, we're not going to talk about Reality Winner specifically. This is just going to be an overarching generic statement about support for the concept of whistleblowers." And then when pressed, the only one they can really mention is the fucking fake whistleblower who works for the CIA.
Who
And
may
to
not even
show
exist. Right.
point out,
It
right?
may not
here-
even be real.
One of Julian's last pieces with RT, I think, that he did was an interview where he was talking about artificial intelligence-based propaganda. And statements like that are a way that I see artificial intelligence-based propaganda. Because what they do is they use social media to literally see what the fuck people care about and what people need to say to get support from certain groups. And then they release vague, veiled statements like, I support whistleblowers, but I'm not going to comment on Reality Winner. And then all of the media, independent or otherwise, run stories that says Bernie Sanders supports whistleblowers. Bernie Sanders supports whistleblowers.
Or
When in
this
the
is
bottom of the article,
that
he
he'll
says,
pardon
I don't give a
You're
fuck about
right.
Reality Winner. And it's just, it drives me crazy that instead of holding these people fucking accountable, everyone's just like, oh, well, he said that one thing. Like, well, what else are you going to do? Who are
No,
you going
and
to vote
it's,
for?
you know, when Ryan Grimm
Exactly.
did that, I actually, like, I tagged him and stuff, and he actually responded to me because first, like, I had said, so I saw that you were going to ask Bernie about the Espionage Act, so I figured you were going to ask about Assange, and then you end up asking about the CIA whistleblower, and then his excuse was, I didn't have enough time, and that
Right.
was when he released only the video and not the article. And then he came out with the article, and then that's when I figured out that he also asked about Reality Winner. And I was like, well, I thought you didn't have enough time to ask about anyone else except the CIA whistleblower.
And that's the whole point.
And yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna add that what he wanted is that headline that said Bernie Sanders pledged to stop prosecuting whistleblowers under the Espionage Act, which he did not do, by the way. All he
Right.
said was, of course not, when he was asked, do you think it's appropriate to prosecute them? That's not a pledge. That's just an opinion that anyone could just say, of course not. But that's, you know, he doesn't have any kind of plan where he would say, I would personally stop doing, you know, this. I would pardon, Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, etc. So, and people keep sharing that article as if they didn't read it and actually see the substance. They're just, looking at the headline, which is exactly what he wanted. So that really, really bothered me.
So in the chat, Alex Hills just said, hey guys, Berlin and Wellington are hitting, and I don't know what that means. Alex, if you could clarify
Yeah.
what you're talking about, because Alex is one of our friends. She's been on the vigils before. She's an awesome activist in New Zealand. So I'm interested as to what she's exactly referring to. Xmas shopping nights, candle displays. She said that Christmas shopping nights, candle displays for Chelsea Manning. Oh, that's pretty cool, actually. So I guess what she's saying is that for Christmas shopping, she put out lights for Chelsea Manning, and that is in Wellington, New Zealand, and in Berlin, Germany. Very cool stuff. And now we're going to be showing you guys the official documentary trailer for XY Chelsea, which I don't know if it came out yet or not. But anyway,
I think it came out this summer, actually.
Okay,
I have not seen it yet, though.
Yeah, here's a trailer for that.
Well, should probably unmute the thing. There we go.
Why would you stop the story?
What story?
Your story.
That's a good question. I didn't know who I was, and I needed meaning, so I enlisted in the Army.
I put together the map that said, go here.
It was this endless stream of violence and death and destruction.
I didn't pull the trigger, but I put the guys who pulled the trigger there.
I wanted people to know the things I was seeing. I have all these documents, and
I said, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to accept the consequences.
Manning stood up as an American soldier, put himself in harm's way, and he should be free.
Under much, and I want to be treated like a human being. I want to be treated like a woman.
You had these rumors. Did she leak the documents because she's transgender?
I'm the same person as I was. I just
Lost 7 years of my life. How different do I look?
maybe it's the trans part of me that feels like life is a coming of age story.
I feel embattled.
Whistleblower Chelsea Manning surprised the political world this week by announcing she was running for the US Senate.
I was told not to come here.
We are in uncharted territory.
You can't stop being who you are.
We know how fragile she is.
I did something stupid.
Oh my God.
I live in a state of uncertainty.
There was a point when we were just trying to keep her alive.
I'm not the person that people think I am.
Wow. Somebody in the chat, Jack Scythe, said, I'm getting chills, such a brave soul on all fronts. I agree. It gave me chills too. I look forward to seeing that. Perhaps we could have a vigil where we watch that and give it a review if we can all access it. That looks really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I'm so glad that people are still bringing her up in the ways and forms that they can, but it's just not enough right now, because she is such, not even just her struggle, because that's monumental in and of itself, but what they're doing to her to get to Julian and things like that are just so despicable. The fact that she can just sit in jail and be fined for existing within a perjury trap, $168,000 is, it's unthinkable.
Right.
Well, it's unconscionable, but it's written into US law that, like, the government has every fucking right to hold you in jail and fine you, designed to break you. And then if you break, they have to let you out. But they have to try to break you. Like, that's the process, the legal process.
John Kiriakou said that too. He said they arrest people on Thursdays for a reason, because they can't talk to them until Monday or the next week, and they want you to get really beaten down and just lose your morale those few days, so that you do crack during an interview or interrogation. So you're exactly right. It's methodical, and it is a process designed to crack a person.
Right, these are there are people who are well-intentioned, well-meaning people who will say entirely unironically that this is the freest country in the world, or that the thing that separates us is how we treat the people that we lock up and stuff like, and these are statements that they believe and that they mean, and it is just a testament to the propaganda effort that goes on historically in this country, that people can walk around in 2019 believing that we're the good guys, or that we humanely treat prisoners of war or political prisoners. And yes, Andrew is 100% right. You must consider Chelsea Manning a political prisoner at this point. Like, there is no other reason for her incarceration other than to get at Julian Assange through a political process, which is getting him extradited to face charges on the Espionage Act. And that is something that is not allowed by international law, by the way. Also not allowed in the treaty that the United States has with the United Kingdom. There is nothing legal about the arbitrary fucking torture and incarceration and detention of Julian Assange or Chelsea Manning. None of it. And there are not enough people who are saying this exact same thing that we've been saying today.
And I think we have to get more people to realize that because we are operating out of the rule of law, that this is being done illegally, that this sets a precedent not only for journalists, but anybody. I mean, a lot of people think, I don't care if the government's spying on me because I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, you may not be doing anything really wrong, but who's going to defend you when the government says you are? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't have to be an actual crime you're committing. The government can decide that Joe Schmo is now guilty of pre-crime because of XYZ, and who's going to defend you then when you aren't actually doing anything wrong in your own eyes? But the government can decide you are.
It turns into the punishment by process, to where even if they pre-crime you, even if you get picked up and you get ran through the ringer for 2 years of your life, that's 2 years of your fucking life. Because this shit just doesn't go away once they get like a trail on you and once they start to actually try to get something. And once they're allowed, once the like public consent is either manufactured or forced down everyone's throats that this is the way it is now, there's not much that we can do to change it once it's set in stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all under the guise, as far as like surveillance and in targeting people, of course, it's all under the guise of this is to keep you safe and we're going after terrorists. So it's completely false to think that just because you're doing nothing wrong doesn't mean this doesn't impact you, because it does. And everybody should care about this. And this goes back to what the 1 versus 5i campaign is all about. It's taking on this mass surveillance state that we're living in, specifically targeting the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. So it's all very interconnected. I do think it's about that time to start wrapping it up. As I was saying, Christy and I are hosting in a few short hours a really, really awesome episode of the 1 versus 5i live stream. You guys do not want to miss this. Lots of information tonight. You will be happy that you tuned into it for sure. And that is at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. I almost said Western Standard Time, Pacific Standard Time. So before we do close out and go around quickly, Sophia, I want to give you an opportunity to let everybody know where they can find you, and then also you know, sort of your endeavors as a journalist, and let everybody know your new YouTube channel as well. And thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate having you here.
I love this. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, we're very happy to have you here. So why don't you go ahead, some final thoughts, and let everybody know where they can find you on social media and all that. Thank you again.
So I was working for the Mi Casa Su Casa network with Nico House, and now I decided to go my own way and just do my own independent journalism. So you can find my YouTube channel, just my first name and last name, Sophia Zaldivar, and you can also follow me on Twitter. It's my first name X, my last name, so Sophia X Zaldivar, and yeah. And I hope to have a lot of guests on to ask them, you know, questions and to get information out there. And I'd love to have, you know, all of you guys on as well to discuss these issues that, again, as I've criticized a lot of independent media for not doing.
Of course, we would all, you know, love to come on. We support you and love the work that you're doing. So thanks again. I will start by closing out just quickly. Thank you everybody for watching today, for joining us again. If you are new here and you are not subscribed, do subscribe, do hit the bell. If you have already subscribed, they do unsubscribe people, so double check and make sure that you are, and also hit the like button and hit the bell, because that'll notify you every time that we go live. Happy birthday to Chelsea Manning. Her birthday is December 17th, as I mentioned earlier. Keep in mind, she's been in jail for 277 days now, up to $168,000 in fines for revealing the truth to a media organization. So that's ultimately what this is about, of course. So again, my name is Taylor Hudak. You can follow me at _Taylor Hudak. And don't forget to join us in a few hours on at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Susie 3D and on Graham Elwood's channel. We'll be tweeting all about that. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be a really, really awesome episode. Christy and I are hosting it, and we have some really, really special guests this evening. So thank you again for watching. I appreciate you all.
You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigmund, Zigmund. Yeah, thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank Julian, Chelsea, and Jeremy for all the work that they've done, and everyone else that's leaked information to try to stop the global imperialist uprising.
My name is Christy Doff. You can find me at Christy Doff on Twitter. Thank you all for joining us on this special episode Sunday. Happy birthday to Chelsea Manning. We wanted to dedicate an episode to show our support for her because, like we said, we feel like not enough attention gets put on her during this time. We hope you will follow her on Twitter and her campaign. I believe she is still raising funds to help with these fines that she incurs every day that she is in prison. So that is a very worthy cause to donate money to this holiday season. Again, you can see me tonight on the 1 versus 5 Eyes special event at 8 p.m. Eastern.
I should unmute myself. My name is Steve Poikinen. I host a show called Slow News Day here on the YouTube. You can find that at youtube.com/Slow News Day podcast. And I'm sorry, it's been a long day for me. I have a regular Sunday live stream that goes from 10 to noon Pacific time. Which you should all come and be a part of. I have incredible people on it, including everyone that you see on the screen right now, because Sophia was on this morning. At any rate, I do not use mainstream media for the baseline content of my show. I go to the documents themselves or actual independent media journalists, and then if I can, I also have those same journalists on my show. So yes, please check that out. You can follow me on Twitter at Slow News Day Show. And yeah, thank you to Sophia and to Jason Burmis and to Ron Placone for being on today. Happy birthday, Chelsea. Trust me, I know what it feels like to spend a birthday in prison. Or not prison, but jail. I do. That happened to me once. Yeah, throw all of your support to just, especially during the holiday season, man. If you're a depressed individual, the holidays suck. If you know a depressed individual, go ahead and give them a squeeze. In the meantime, I love all of you. Thank you for being here and being a part of this. Good luck to us all.